One more time, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're really, really thrilled to have this conversation now about artificial intelligence. We were thinking how best to do it, and the first names that came to our minds were Adina Tarry and Rebecca Rutschmann, especially because the involvement of each of them in different areas that are related with IT and coaching and all of those things that stay behind, including ethics. And that's an area that Adina can talk more about, and especially the IT part. That's an area where I know for sure Rebecca has a lot input to give. I think Vlad and myself, most people, they might have seen us before, our faces on different recordings from Coaching and Mentoring Festival. It's a group that we're trying to keep conversations and open conversations related to coaching and things that are useful topics to have thoughts on them. And I'm going to think that would be best use the time to just give Adina and Rebecca a chance to introduce themselves and then dive into this wonderful conversation. Adina, do you want to tell us a couple of words about yourself?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to contribute today. I think about me, well, my professional profile is in the public domain, so people can research the details. But I think one thing that's important to mention is that I've had two very interesting careers in my life. My first career was in business, and I worked globally in corporations with IBM, Alcatel, Johnson & Johnson, Bristol Myers. And I lived internationally. And in business, I've done almost every job in a business that exists apart from technical jobs. And that is because I really love the business environment and I love economics generally. I also love science and technology since childhood. So that explains the tech part and my interest. Not being an engineer, I still have a very strong background of So that explains the tech part and my interest. Not being an engineer, I still have a very strong background and understanding of technology. My second career, because I'm a qualified psychologist and an accredited master coach, was dedicated to people development. And this is where the so-called soft side of my skills and experience comes in. And so in the end, my thinking combines both business and hard science with the soft aspects of people development and including coaching and including organizational and consumer psychology. So my angle is integrative and multidisciplinary. And I think that's important in terms of understanding how I think.
Thank you, Adina. Rebecca?
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I am the co-founder of Evoge. We fully digitalize coaching via a chatbot AI-led application. So that's something that I founded with my co-founder Anke about 2 years ago. I'm a certified business coach for probably 10, 12 years almost now. I have been mainly working in IT most of my life, I think besides 2 years in the automobile industry. And I also introduced leadership programs into a big IT company working on a global level. That's probably was the trigger point for doing my coaching education back then, which was highly needed and highly welcomed by me. And what always kept my brain busy was how to digitalize coaching, how to use online and virtual coaching in a workplace, and how to make it more accessible for a lot of people, especially all kinds of different employees in different levels, not only to leadership, because I worked a lot with developers and they do also request and they also profit a lot from coaching throughout all departments really, but make it really more accessible for a very diverse employeeship within companies. So that's what we are mainly doing, and I'm mostly leading the product side and the development side together with the CTO, who is doing, of course, all the programming and looking after the programmers, but I'm the conceptor, and I work on like new areas of implementing artificial intelligence into our chatbot system as well.
Thank you very much. It's an exciting topic, and I really am excited to dive in. And I think the first question is about IE, and until Cristina will launch the presentation, I hope Adina will give us a short introduction about this topic.
Well, I think that just as a general introduction, I think that what's happening with science and technology is that they have always been part of the human evolution and are really significant in what we call human civilization. And human civilization is exceptional because we are able to produce tools, and we are able to modify our interaction with the world around through various very smart, intelligent mechanisms. So the idea of computing and using machines to do things that humans do and basically free the humans from certain tasks is very, very old. In fact, we have automata and all sorts of, let's call them toys or helpers appearing in the Middle Ages. If we look at something very, very simple, which automates and simplifies work, let's look at the sewing machine. And then further looking at processes of manufacturing and the various successive industrial revolutions, what we are doing is basically creating tools in order to take away some of the tasks that we humans do, and they can be physical task or mental task. And this is where then the differentiation comes, you know, in the relationship between automation or autonomous helpers and also the mechanism behind it, which instead of being mechanical is now digital, and it is now through the medium of software. We already have about 3 million robots working for us, and the robots, you know, like physical helpers to do difficult tasks and repetitive tasks, exist since I think the 60s, especially in manufacturing. Generally speaking, manufacturing and supply chain have been the pushers and the drivers of automation and software development. So coming to artificial intelligence is just another way of utilizing the information technology and the data, which is part of the information technology, to help us in simplifying and helping our activity as humans through machines that can either behave like humans or do certain thinking processes instead of humans, to basically free our time to do something else. And so that's pretty much the definition in broad terms. And coming to coaching, once again, we are also looking at the possibility that we could automate and free some of the coaches' time to do certain things in another way, whilst the coaches are left with doing something which is a little bit more complex. But I'm going to stop here and just try to position that technology, automation, artificial intelligence, software are all technological applications of science with the same purpose, which is to make easy and simplify the work of human beings and transfer it to some helpers who actually can do that stuff for us whilst we are doing something else. And I think Rebecca can take it from here on the actual science of this.
I was just wondering where Cristina is, because she wanted to share the slides. She's not in the call now anymore, no? Did somebody realize that?
Yeah, I think so. She get out, and also I succeeded to get out. to just
you succeeded. Wow.
yeah, just to prove our level of competence in technical side.
Okay.
At least I graduated University of Medicine. Cristina is a cybernetics person. She should do better. I am not sure what happened with her, but she will come. So can you share, because I think you are now co-host and you should.
I'm co-host, but I haven't downloaded the file.
I'm back here.
She's back. Very good.
I'm back.
Yeah.
The internet connection went down everywhere. So I'm back and I can share my screen. Yay! So I got back exactly the right moment.
I just downloaded it, but yeah, it's better if you can share it, Cristina. Welcome back.
A second, I'm pushing already the button of share. So there you go. It's on the screen. And now it's going to take a second until it moves to the next slide.
That's okay.
So
I just wanted to.
Were we here at what is artificial intelligence?
Yes. Okay, I can start with that. I'm not sure that everybody is now on the same track here. We usually talk a lot about that in other communities, but what I think the general understanding of what is artificial intelligence, it's a really big field, yeah, of different applications. And I think what most people still really don't understand is that machine learning is a big part of AI, but it's not the only thing. And deep learning is a part of machine learning, yeah, including that. And they all, I just love that picture to give a better understanding of what goes where, because it's always a little bit difficult that machine learning is also like already introducing a lot of algorithms, but they're usually supervised learnings, while deep learning, we touch the field of unsupervised learning, which works more like our brains, like it works with neural networks. And that's where then what we call the strong AI applies to in general. Most of the applications that we see nowadays, they are still in the field of a weak AI. So they're more part of like algorithms working with data scientists, and they are slowly touching the areas of deep learning now, but it's still very small fields. So if we go on to the next slide. You left one slide out, but what's important to know, what most people think that AI wants to replace the people itself, but it doesn't want to replace people. It simply automates tasks, not people. So I'm curious what the next one is. That's the one I thought would be first. Yeah. So if we see here, there is a very wide field of AI applications that are already in place. And there are only very few areas that are really relevant when we talk about coaching and AI, which is mainly the area of voice recognition, speech recognition, and natural language understanding. So really understanding what people are talking about, which is also applied in AI-powered chatbots, which is something that we do, and also to personalize user experience. By also maybe introducing something like user-centered learning. So most AIs, they learn like on a very broad level. For example, like most of the social media platforms are doing also for their advertising and everything like that. So they take into account all kinds of posts throughout the whole world and try to understand and try to find an average and then play it out. But when we talk especially using AI in coaching, we need to talk also about a more user-centric approach. So you can click to the next. Which then leads us into the area which is most important for coaching, is the area of natural language processing and natural language understanding, which is one of the big parts that we probably need to know more about as coaches, also for the future, because this can also assist and help and support us in different areas. And as you can see here from the graphic, it actually does touch all the other areas. So it touches AI itself, it touches machine learning, and it also has a big influence into deep learning. So by recognizing just certain contents and speeches to really going into neural networks, deep learning and understanding user intents and self-teaching.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I think that brings a bit of broader picture of what that means and where and how everything gets developing. And I would also ask Adina, what are her thoughts on this one? How do you see it? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
Yes, the way I look at it is actually what are the applications of artificial intelligence, and they are around language, and they are around recognition, pattern recognition, face recognition, because both of these applications are used in coaching, but they are also used in recruitment processes. And also artificial intelligence is used in training and development in organizations in order to basically select, analyze, and recommend training programs for individuals. So it becomes a personalized service. Now, for me, all these methods, recognizing speech, recognizing facial expressions, and also, for instance, recommending specific training programs to individuals are simply conduits of mediating information that exists outside the machine into the machine. So basically, if someone understands natural language, is the way that I transfer what's in my head into a machine through the medium of speech, exactly like we do with human beings. I think that generally artificial intelligence is an attempt that we make to mimic behaviors and decisions that are human into another medium, which is a machine. So we build machines to imitate humans. And of course, in order to do that, in the first instance, we need to understand how humans work. In other words, how we think, how we recognize the faces, how we make judgments when we recommend, let's say, as an HR practitioners, the training and development program for a person or another. Once we understand that, we replicate that in a machine, and we do that through the medium of programming. And what effectively we do is we transform information and knowledge into data. Data is a language of zeros and ones, which we humans do not speak, because if you give me a page full of zeros and ones, I have no idea what that says, but the machine does speak 0 and 1s. Whereas we work with information, and that is the translation of content into a medium that we understand. In our case, it's language. And then knowledge is another layer which comes on top, which means that when we get information, such as there are clouds in the sky, we interpret that information and we conclude it's going to rain. Now that transforms information into knowledge. And then one more step, when we accumulate knowledge over millennia, which we have done for 10,000 years of civilization, we transform knowledge into wisdom. So I think it's important for us to understand the languages, who speaks what, and what does it mean? What's the difference between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom? Which one is for machines? Which one is for people? So for me, it's really this kind of replication of human activities and human thoughts and behaviors into a machine.
Sorry, thank you very much, Adina and Rebecca, for the introduction. Oh, it's hard with AI and technology today. I don't know exactly why. One thing that I would like to ask all of you, how we bring together AI with coaching, because for AI, table is table, but in coaching, table has a lot of meaning and references for us. So how can blend coaching with AI?
Who would you like to answer? Both Rebecca and myself, I think, from a different perspective.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, and also I would like to see some comments in the chat. We have the chat open, and we'd like some input and questions from participants based on their experience and based on what they are interested to find out more.
Mm-hmm.
So we start with ours, Adina, and
Sure,
then we'll see what's coming. What's coming in the chat. So, coaching and AI for me in the future, like what I see is a really like a blended approach. I think that AI can support coaches in many different ways, like doing like a first analysis, giving their coachees tasks in the beginning, getting some more input on repetitive things that you do, especially in the beginning of your coaching with like a new client. You could like send up a chatbot experience to your client, asking like the questions to better to getting to know the client in the beginning. And like a lot of the coaches, they use the wheel of life, for example, that someone can fill in the beginning and get asked questions, and then you get sent kind of like a summary that you can then look through as a coach and work with that. And also after coaching or in between coaching sessions, I think that AI will really be like a great surplus in the end for your client itself. It will also be able in the near future to recognize intents, like the actual concern of your clients, which is something that we're currently working on. But it's something that can also support you in finding like what we call the topic behind the topic in coaching. Yeah, so what's the issue? Is there any issues behind? It can support you in many different ways, like it does, for example, with doctors. Yeah, doctors work with AI to actually sort through a lot of data to better diagnose the patient. But in the end, it's the doctor who treats the patient to make the decision, who has the time talking to the patient and really figuring out everything in depth. So I think you can see it a little bit similar to that. So there are a lot of fields where it can support. And my future with coaching and AI is really that it goes hand in hand, that we will, within the next 10, 15 years, not be able to replace the real coaching community, like a conversation with an AI. So we will need, as human beings, other human being interaction. This is necessary from a psychological point of view. And what AI will do, it will really help you to concentrate on the actual coaching interaction with your clients, and really being there and empathetic and looking after the client itself, and having the AI in the background supporting. Adina.
Yes.
Adina, I'm gonna, before you start, I'm really sorry, but I've noticed something in the chat and I find it relevant just to link it now with what Rebecca was saying. And Julia wrote in the chat, plus you can identify measures as follow-up from coaching, further training, reading, apps, and so on. As it links with what you were saying, Rebecca, I was thinking of pushing it back to you now, saying, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, like you can have a recommendation then in the end of kind of like you identified different topics through like the coaching process, and then you can add on, further learning materials, like Julia wrote. Yeah, so it really will help you to even get a better experience in total for your coachee.
Thank you for that. Adina, I'm really sorry, please go ahead. I'm gonna put also a beautiful slide up because I know that was a brilliant input from your side.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
Yes, I think that before we move to this, which is actually an interesting other facet, I would like to make sure that I do not repeat what Rebecca said, and I'm fully in agreement with what she said. What I'm going to say is that I look at the collaboration between AI and coaches as a collaboration between quantity and quality. And I would say, once again, going back to my initial model, that machines are designed to simplify certain tasks which humans do not necessarily need to do if someone else can do. So the other thing is that Rebecca, what she mentioned was trying to understand intent. And I think that that's a very ambitious and probably further afield sort of objective, because to understand intent, it's something that we humans even struggle to do properly. Not everyone is equally good at what we call emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and so on. Intent comes through different sources, such as voice, intonation, context, facial expressions. And as Vlad put it, language may have a particular significance. When you say table, it may mean table, but it may mean many other things depending on intention and other things. I would also say that coaching is part of what is called dialogical professions, and the dialogical professions are based on dialogue. And artificial intelligence has already been effectively automated dialogue has already been used, for instance, in the UK for at least 7 years in therapy. And so it's already been deployed successfully. So it is not a case that we don't know that it works and that people actually enjoy that interaction, but it is how to make it better and to develop it in other dialogical fields. The difference remains that the qualitative analysis of the content of the exchange that a robot can collect is interpreted through the mechanism of turning information into knowledge and meaning. And that is a conversion that is done by the skill of the human being. So really, it is a matter of going back to what I said to open my comment. It's a nice collaboration and balance between quantity and quality, where the quality at this moment in time and for some time to come is brought in by the skill and the experience of the human coach, because that interpretation and transfer of information into knowledge and wisdom, meaning making, and plans of action, and what is the smart way of solving problems remains still the domain of skilled coaches.
Thank you, Adina. I think it would be also useful to just capture also, there's some beautiful questions in the chat. And I think would be also useful before that to go through that triangle that you very nicely brought to the discussion, and spend a couple of short minutes on that one, and then move to the questions in the chat, because one of them definitely links to a subsequent part of what we had in mind. So that was the triangle that it got formed in the first discussion that we had on this one.
Yeah.
You want to share a bit of your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so in this, it's very interesting because, as we all know, science and technology are domains where the aspect of ethics appears at the moment in time. In principle, let's say that science operates in a kind of a blind situation. In other words, a little bit like justice. Science does research, and that's what they do. And there is pretty much not necessarily a good or bad science in the sense that we do a bit of research, but the minute we transform that science into what is called technology and it becomes applied in real life with real human being, we immediately run into ethical questions. So every single technological application, and then retrospectively, the scientific research that has gone into that technology becomes scrutinized ethically. Unfortunately, the ethics are always lagging behind technology, and sometimes by a very, very long distance. Now, so there are ethical challenges with science and technology, including artificial intelligence technology, right? That is inherent to the actual process of science and technological development. The coaching profession is also subject to a lot of ethical dilemmas and ethical principles. And now if you combine the two, what you do is that you import the ethical dilemmas and problems that already exist in the technology and artificial intelligence into coaching. And now you have a double dose of ethical questions, which result independently in each domain, as well as in the combination of the two. So it is a huge part of the coaching area of answers yet to be given, just as it is for technology. And unfortunately, ethics is not as simple as mathematics. It's a complex domain of research. It's a branch of philosophy. It has got 3 different aspects to it, including applied ethics, which is the course of action that you do as an individual in a certain situation. Normative ethics, which looks at the principles that control behavior and decisions, and meta ethics, which is the theoretical framework of how we construct this judgment. And ethics, of course, is something that is a dynamic domain. It changes with culture, it changes with time. What was morally correct 500 years ago is no longer correct, and so on. There are norms and moral codes that are 2,000 years old and are still applied today, with other sets of ethical principles that are only 20 years old. And so therefore, it is a big, huge, enormous topic, but very difficult to crack quickly.
Thank you so much, Adina. And I really like the way you brought into there's also a similarity between what's happening and behind artificial intelligence and coaching, and that is this ethical dilemmas and ethical stand. And I think indeed they get some also in a way of amplified at some point when you mix them together without being mindful of them. So we really like this part of our conversation, and I think that's a point that would be wonderful if everyone can be mindful of and start having a conversation on that. And I'm wondering now also, Rebecca, how is it seen from your IT side? Is there something that you want to share on this one?
There are probably many different areas. I think it's something that you have to really keep in mind when starting before starting implementing AI into your systems, is like really concepting it and trying to be aware of these issues. I saw in the chat that Basaf was his name, I think, had a really interesting question also in regards to that. What was it? That he thinks that that part of the coaching engagement will almost certainly be better performed by an AI, which is something that goes more into the direction of bias, what we know also from coaching. Like being really, because you have your own system, your own learnings, and you always, I mean, like as coaches, it's one of the hardest thing to do, like taking all of this out, keeping neutral as neutral as possible. And this is something that is actually, let's say, if we talk about the basic, it is natural to the technology of AI, but it's not natural then, of course, to the data input, because the data that we relate the algorithms and the AI technology on also is struggling with bias. So when we design something like integrating AI into a system, this is something that we have to be aware of the very beginning, is what kind of data do we base the algorithms on, and how do we actually collect clean data, high quality data that we base then the algorithm on. And this is one really of the biggest challenges, because for us, the big challenge is, where do you get that quality data? Yeah, people have to agree on that their data is being used. You have to have a good quality coaching process to extract that data from. So I can't ask a coaching question in, let's go extreme, on Twitter, and then take out all this data, all the responses I got, and try to create, you know, or like have an algorithm running over the data and then having great output. That's not going to work like that. So it's actually something that starts with the design of the whole thing and how to collect the data in the beginning. And I think this is also a challenge, but by itself, the AI and the algorithms, of course, are more neutral than we are as individual beings. And if we take good care of where the data is coming from and that it comes from diverse sources, yeah, not only, and sorry for all the guys, not only white male from a certain culture or like a certain continent, only coaching in very specific ways. If we keep this also diverse, broad, and open, I think we do have a great chance of being successful in that field. But I mean, this takes time. We're not talking about months. We're talking about years and decades. Yeah.
And I was smiling because this is the trap, and this is the feedback loop. As a psychologist, speaking now as a psychologist, the problem is that as human beings, we are riddled with unconscious bias. Because it is unconscious, we don't even know that it exists. And therefore, the initial input into anything that we replicate, because this is what we are doing, we are replicating human mind, human information, human knowledge, human wisdom into machines, is already by default and by design of the human psyche vulnerable to biases. So even before we try to debias what we get from humans, we need to debias the humans themselves initially. And that is work in progress. I mean, there are all sorts of programs and training programs that are in place to debias our thinking. And the last time I looked, when I did my research, there were about 140 thinking biases and all judgment biases, all sorts of biases that we daily sort of apply in our thinking. And if any of you were to look at that list, you'll identify immediately which bias you understand that, oh, suddenly, you know, yeah, I know I'm doing this, and which biases you may not ever know. So what I'm trying to say, without discouraging anything, is that we have a problem with the initial origin of information, which is then transferred into the machine, turned into data, and which we are trying to debias. As Rebecca was saying, what we are looking at is increasing self-awareness, increasing awareness of biases, including by the people who collect information to put into machines themselves, and the people who program themselves in the first instance, and then moving on to trying to keep the data clean, and then trying to keep the outputs clean of biases. So it's work in progress, and it's extremely complex, because as a psychologist, it begins with the human being. Remember that.
But it's also fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I'm saying is that, remember, we are replicating the human mind. Whatever is right or wrong in the human mind will appear in the machine.
Thank you, Adina. And look, you have Julia. You made all of us curious. But Julia was asking if we can have that list, and maybe you can share it with us, and we'll post it on the page.
Research unconscious biases. Just Google it.
Oh,
yeah, it's one of the first things that pops up.
Then we'll share
anyway,
it.
I do hope all of us will keep contact and will generate some content either on the event pages or on coaching and mentoring festival pages, because it's an amazing subject. And this is bringing me to trying to make a connection between questions in the chat and everything it's on our agenda for today. On one point, there is a question from Mariana who is thinking that AI will help to democratize the coaching, which also make me to think our reaction to what's happened with data and WhatsApp, and how easy will be for us to accept this AI in our life and giving data or relevant data about us. How is with the emotion? Because I saw a discussion about AI in Oxford Brookes, and all the coaches become very emotional about the topic and about the fact that AI is a computer, it's a cold machine, and it lack all the human emotion, all the human interaction that make coaching and mentoring very different than all the other adult learning tools. Which brings to Bogdan question regarding how this will impact deep learning. And we have a lot of ways to go. So Adina or Rebecca.
Yeah, I think that Rebecca is our expert on machine learning. What I would say is that I'm not sure. Maybe we are waking up 20 years later at the problem of giving away personal data. But the minute we have joined any kind of social media, or you have made a purchase on Amazon, and all of us have done that many years ago, you have given away your personal information. So it's 20 years too late to ask this question. The horses have bolted. So remember that. And people, I've asked people questions about who is responsible for the information that can be used or misused on social media. And I have got the astonishing answer that the tech companies are responsible. Now, I happen to think that we have personal responsibility for that. And whatever you put in the public domain is in the public domain, and then it gets used and often abused. Now, of course, we are trying to regulate the big techs, and that's going to take some time because they don't want to be regulated. They are making money from information, right? So it's too late. Basically, Facebook knows everything. Amazon knows when you blink what you had for breakfast, everything already. So it's lost. That kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to protect one thing or another, is too late now. What we can do is regulate and try to regain some control, and that's not going to happen, in my view, that easily. Now about coaching and emotions. What's happening is that emotions effectively are something good and bad that we have inherited from our natural biological development. On the one hand, they give us a lot of energy and protection because they fuel our behaviors, which are usually survival and protective. On the other hand, in the modern world, they can become a little bit of an inconvenience because we can go into a very primitive state of a negative, particularly negative emotions, and that clouds us cortical ability to think rationally, which is the latest layer and the human layer of rational thinking, and it literally hijacks it. This is why actually having and not having emotions in the coaching process are both very good. And this is why from time to time getting a machine to do coaching where that other partner, which is the machine, has no emotion is great, because they take themselves outside of the possibility of being triggered emotionally. Now in therapy, people have appreciated the therapy online because it has avoided for them additional emotions of shame or embarrassment, which you would have with a human being, right? Which means that you have a much cleaner sort of dialogue and collection of information. We also know that there are some therapy practices where people who are on the autistic spectrum and therefore are a little bit less emotional in their natural state actually make better therapists, and I would guess potentially better coaches. So what I'm saying is that this idea that we all need to be emotional all the time in everything we do is actually wrong. There are many situations where not having emotions is the best way. And we know that professionals who work in very stressful situations, like surgeons, like medics, they learned to actually detach themselves emotionally because otherwise just wouldn't be able to perform. So in that sense, I think that empathy comes in at that point where we start to interpret and make meaning of the information that the machine may have extracted through an automated process. And that's where we can introduce human intelligence, meaning making, all the mechanisms that we have in order to create that qualitative input that remains the domain of human being. So once again, we need not look at emotions as something positive or negative, but something that needs to appear and disappear at different moments in the process to get the best outcome.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Adina. Listening to you, I remember two things. One, that there are generation who born with Internet of Things around, and Alexia and Hey Google is part of their life. And coming to Rebecca regarding the deep learning and how we blend everything, we had a nice observation in our talk before this event, that actually artificial intelligence is dumb, while most people have a tendency to take bad decisions. So, Rebecca, how is with deep learning, and how can we mix things in a better way for our lives? Because I do think that is actually the meaning to improve our lives.
I think what you said about the mix is, for me, one of the most essential points. Yeah, the quest, like, we don't need to have a complete deep learning AI system that coaches us, because I don't really think that's helpful in the end. I think applying areas like simple decision trees, which also covers AI, but doesn't have anything to do with deep learning at all, is one of the easiest and best ways to really start. And then you constantly have to ask yourself the question, where does application of AI really support the coaching process by adding value for the coachee in the end? So do I really need to, going back to emotions, need to implement recognizing emotions? Does that add value to the process itself at that specific point in the coaching process? Because maybe at that point, so what do we do? So when I recognize emotions by my coachee, how am I going to react as an AI if I would be the AI? Yeah. Do I kind of like mirror that back? Does it help the client? Like, do I interpret it and come up with another question? Maybe what the AI analyzed wasn't really right. So I have to first double check with the coachee that this is really what he feels, because just by the AI detecting it, talking about data, all the data input doesn't mean that it really detected the right emotion. So the coachee has to then first confirm it. Might be kind of being out of his coaching process and his thoughts. So does it really help? So this is a constant question that you have to ask yourself when you design a AI chatbot, yeah? And which points, or for example, like we had in the beginning, intent recognition by recognizing the actual issue that the coachee has when he writes his problem in, still needs a verification, because the AI might be right in 80%, but not in 20%. And like the 20% that it might be wrong, they could have a really negative experience for the coachee, leading to him being really aggressive about it or not liking it at all, leaving the complete system. So it doesn't really help. So you need a kind of like verification always within the process. And sometimes we made the experience that simple decision trees already help someone in his self-reflection, because it keeps the complete coaching process clean. Yeah, so the AI can't misinterpret something. We can't have any like bias influencing it. And then just adding, you know, like AI at certain, let's say, steps within the coaching process where it does make sense for the coachee and where he actually benefits from it. So, and there, when we talk then about deep learning, these are areas where deep learning can then, for example, really help. Yeah, for example, like we said in the beginning, like trying to identify intents is a deep learning process, because you need a lot of data to actually have good results in the end. Yeah, you could, as like training data, have already like a set of between 100 and 1,000 data sets, but to have something then in that the user can still like verify and confirm. But if you want really the AI to make a decision on what your issue is and what it will then ask you, you know, furthermore, we're talking about millions of data sets. So that's like a big decision to undertake if you say, okay, I want to apply this field of AI within my system or within whatever people develop in regards to that.
Can I just very quickly give an analogy,
yes,
which
sure.
might be simpler to understand and maybe people are familiar? Speaking as a psychologist, we all know about psychometric assessments, and we all know about the reports that come back from these psychometric assessments, and they are standardized and all sorts of methods. So it's a scientific tool which is developed scientifically. Okay, and then what happens is that I, as a coach or as a psychologist, get this report, which usually comes to me, not necessarily directly to the client. Why? Precisely because I need to have a conversation with the client. Why? Because in that report, I may have a flag around a certain behavior or a certain value system that it's a bit questionable, and I need to actually verify what that means. So, and I'll give you an example, very simple. I was doing some work in banking. I was doing a value and beliefs kind of assessment tool, and there was a flag there about this person loving risk-taking, right? Very high on taking risks. Now in a bank, this is like a very big red flag. And so I went into the session without giving the report and without interpreting it, and I started a conversation. It transpired that that person loved high-risk sports, you know, scuba diving, para jumping, motorbike riding in the desert, and God knows what. So really, it was very interesting to see where the risk appetite was actually applied and how it could have been misinterpreted in an automated way by saying this person cannot be employed in a bank because this person is a risk taker. So what I'm trying to say is that, and I'll repeat this model, the model is quantity versus quality. And right now it's the humans who assess the quality and give the finer interpretation in collaboration with the client, with the person who has been the source of that information in the first instance, the person who answered the question to the bot or to the coach. Because whichever way you look at it, clarification and the best course of action is done through collaboration. So we need to, if we do one single thing at the end of the session and we stop thinking in binary terms, that will take us a quantum leap into understanding and embracing AI. We need to stop this either or and embrace a combination and understand that the contributions are of a different nature and are complementary and help each other. So again, right now, the human being has got the upper hand, and the human being is the element who analyzes, catalyzes, recommends and vets the course of action in collaboration with the client by using various methodologies, including psychometric assessment, including, chatbots, including whatever you want, any kind of team exercises or in-tray exercises or whatever you want to do. Multiple data points lead to a better understanding of the situation than looking at the person from just one narrow angle. And so again, we need to embrace this integrative, non-binary model of utilizing many resources to come up to the best possible outcome through human intelligent integration and interpretation.
Thank you so much, Adina. And I really like that what's in the chat saying is just adding perspectives and this stop either or. So that's a change of perspective, and that's true. And I think that was our scope, at least today, to look at this conversation of let's put a small stone there that helps us build this road of changing perspectives and thinking in directions of what does that actually mean. And I think that was one thing that I truly enjoyed from the conversation with both of you also before, this embracing change and this thing with embracing the opportunities that technology can bring to us, and not necessarily this perspective of saying, oh my God, we're just going to be extinct now as coaches because look, a machine will do everything instead of us. It's just saying, so how can we use both of these opportunities from there and that knowledge? And I think there was a beautiful comment also in the chat that somebody was saying about this like great advantage of a human being that can read all of those things and can look at emotions and can see how you can transfer them and what do you understand from that interaction. As I'm really also mindful of the time, I said it before, and I'm really sorry, I'm the one with no, what time is it? We have 2 minutes to wrap up, and I have the sense of the feeling, and I had the feeling of this entire hour that there's a lot more need of this kind of conversations. So I see also Mariana nodding, and we'll take that as a beautiful feedback for us, and we'll do our best to generate another talk on this area, so we can continue to exchange ideas on this one. But I would gladly give a chance to everyone who wants to jump in and share their thoughts or their takeaways or something that that this session brought to them. So please go ahead.
Can I just add one more thing? And then sure. I'm going to be out of it. No, like when we talk about ethics before, and I see all the discussions in the chat, and I think like what I'm trying to push with some people from the ICF in Germany at the moment is really like an ethics committee where coaches and technology developers and like universities, faculty for coaching need to sit together and really lead these discussions and discuss this a lot more and as much as we can. Yeah, and maybe it will also be great for Romania and other countries to do that as well. And then one day have really a European committee where we combine then also different cultural backgrounds and stuff like that. So it would be great if something like that would happen.
Yeah, just speaking from the same perspective, we have global codes of ethics, and we have in the UK organizations that coaching sort of roundtables where we look at the future of coaching, including the technology. And on a European level, we also have the data protection regulation, which actually is one of the mechanisms of controlling these ethical dilemmas. And I think that regulation of the industry, of the IT industry in itself and the tech industry in the first instance, it's going to help us very much to solve some ethical dilemmas when applied in coaching. Because as I said before, we have ethics of each industry has got their ethical dilemmas. And then when two different professions come together, those ethics become even, double in as a challenge. So yes, we are doing that, and we need to continue. Why? Because unfortunately, ethics is a conversation, is not an event, and it's not a moment when you make a decision. There are so many debates going back and forth, and there are so many points of view. This is why I think pluralism and embracing non-binary thinking, it's very challenging, but is necessary for the future, because the future is complex. The future is not simple and is not getting any simpler any day soon. So we need to develop our own intellectual capability. And our own thinking processes to a higher level of reflective thinking, analytical thinking, all sorts of critical thinking, very important, which is developed in stages. So we need to make an effort to raise our own capability to embrace multiple sources and multiple perspectives.
So please, everybody, if you want to point something, to give something from your experience, or just to give us a new question for a second episode, you can unmute your mic. I will just say that based on what Adina told on one-to-one coaching with psychometric, I just thought how could be helpful in team coaching, team of teams in an organization with thousands of employees. But on the other hand, I just started a coaching session on time management with one person. And I thought, because today it's the AI event, how would be to give this person kind of halter. I don't know if you are familiar with the term. It's a monitor of arterial tension that you keep with you over several days to monitor what's happened, because time management could have a lot of derailers, and for sure I cannot be beside him all the time, but a small robot will be able to notice everything that make hard in time management for that person, and we'll just wrap up on the insights. So
all this exists.
I will stop here, and I let you to comment, just to say that usually 2 minutes for us is 15 minutes actually, so we still have some time.
Any thoughts?
Hi, this is Bogdan. If I can jump in, thank you very much, Adina and Rebecca, for these very nice insights. And as someone in the chat just mentioned, it was mostly focused on the coachee perspective, this discussion about how the impact would impact those who benefit from our services as coaches. But will also be interesting in the next episode if we can focus the discussion on, okay, there are a lot of apps, there are a lot of tools that can help us as coaches to maximize the finance, the follow-up, the marketing side of business. That'd be a great thing to do in the next episode, just to see what's out there and to stretch the discussion.
Thank you so much. We'll take that one on board. We'll think about how we can address that one, and we'll think about also what kind of speakers or who can we invite to just provide that kind of like deep insights. So thank you so much, Bogdan. Julia, I saw your hand going up, and I'm not sure if it was about adding something.
No, it's the same subject, because I think we all struggle with things like, okay, so you agree on stuff at the end of the session to be done in the middle of the coaching process. Overall, this is the stuff you should follow up. If this could be automated in the first step, would be a lot more helpful for coaches actually than trying to help me interpret the facial expression, because honestly, like Adina said, everything we do is an intervention. So whether I say, do I put this emotion on the table? Do I not comment at all? Whatever I do is an intervention. So this kind of stuff, I don't think we're struggling with so much as a coach. So I would really like to see a session from a coach perspective, because there's a lot of stuff that I could think of that I would like help with.
Cool.
Just to say a lot of these applications already exist.
Exactly.
The biometric exists. There are organizations now that have fitted their leadership team with biometric sensors in order to look at the stress, because stress, particularly in senior managers, is very high. There is risk, there is business continuity, all the rest of it. Also, what you said about follow-up and so on, reminders, all of that already exists. The number of applications that already exist is enormous. Actually, it's scary, and the new ones come every day. They are released every day. You lose track of them. So we have too much in a way. And one of my thoughts was, so now that you have all these tools, what do you do with it?
Because and how do you integrate them?
Well, exactly. I was in a conversation with a senior HR person in a big corporation who had the data biometrics of 300 leaders. And he was saying, so I don't know what to do with it. And I said, well, that's the problem. Well, first of all, there is a big question about collecting the data and the rest of it, but leaving that aside, so how does it help? I have a friend who's got all sorts of devices to run, to do this, to do that, and she wants to lose weight. Well, she hasn't lost weight just because she bought another device that measures how many steps she takes. So it's not about, it's not about that. So we need to move on. It's back again to what I'm saying is the qualitative analysis, the intelligent analysis, the integration and filtering through this noise, because it can become a noise, all this information. So anyway, what we have is a lot of tools right now. What we don't have is a clear path necessarily on how to integrate and use them. That's what it is.
And we'll take this one on us to search and see who would be the best discussion partners and have a follow-up session. And definitely we would love to get more input from Rebecca and from Adina, and we'll try to keep in touch and see what else comes to your mind that would be useful to keep the conversation talking and get those perspectives opened and not keep it like it's
also from Julia and also from everybody. And also I do think that because I still have on my site Bogdan, I think we should have also think how AI is working in other fields, because I know that in recruitment AI is used, and not everybody is happy with what is happened.
No.
And so everybody is using properly. So we can look how AI is used in different fields, especially in the fields related with humans. And I think we'll have, it's a must to have a next episode.
Cool. Thank you. And definitely follow us somehow on the festival pages so you can figure out when we'll do the next ones. In the meantime, we'll start already looking and Googling and assessing with whom else can we talk and what else can we bring new. And I hope that everyone gets the chance to live with a tiny bit of better understanding or a different perspective out of today.